Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session, which is, I think it's going to be a little bit of uh, a mix of both technology and strategy that we're going to talk about in this session. So, whichever part of the world you are, welcome and hope you enjoyed the session and feel free to ask any questions you might have. So today's topic is really about how do we go about building a comprehensive cyber defense or resilient portfolio? As we know, we are living in the age of digital business transformation. You talk to the energy industry, you talk to the education industry, which I come from. You talk to the media industry. Just about everyone seems to have a digital transformation program within their company to drive the next wave of business opportunities. So today, if you look at the business paradigm, and this is pretty much true in most industries, where there are several challenges that are there today. Number one, as we have evolved through our enterprise network, as we have evolved from an enterprise architecture, we have invested a significant amount of money in security tools and technology, and to be honest, sometimes we lose track of it. What's the investment that I've made? We could be having a data loss prevention tool sitting somewhere in a corner office, maybe enabled for a particular network that we might not be even aware of. And as we have started to move into the cloud and really build service-oriented architectures using microservices, some of our technology requirements have changed, right? A great example, let's say, hey, you're building a digital platform using the AWS stack, and you're using container driven microservices architecture, where you're using Docker, you're using Kubernetes for orchestration. So that a lot of the tools investments that I've made on my traditional enterprise may not be even applicable on such an environment. So the mix of cloud tools versus on-prem, how do we really understand what's that I require to truly build a resilient and a balanced cybersecurity portfolio investment in my tools and technologies. The vendor landscape, as we know, I get contacted just about every other day about some new cloud, tool, or some new tool or technology that can help me to detect anomalous behavior or advanced threat protection. So pretty much, the vendor landscape is so evolved today. You have too many choices, in my view, sometimes when you want to pick a particular tool set or a technology. The other important thing is, while we make all these investments in the security tools and technology, what about the refresh cycles, right? You could have new capabilities. Let's say you invested in a firewall management platform that has the ability to manage both cloud-based firewall deployments as well as on-prem. As the feature sets evolve, how do we make sure we are utilizing those feature sets? How do we make sure the refresh cycles are managed? And then the bigger question, I know this is pretty much discussed in a lot of the cyber forums that I've been part of, the shift from protective technologies to detection response to truly prepare your company to be able to respond to a breach when it happens, and in essence driving business resilience. So traditionally we have invested a lot in protection technologies. How do I make sure my over-reliance on a particular stack of the technology? Let's say, hey, what's my investment on the endpoint level versus the platform layer versus my app layer versus my user layer? So in terms of relying sometimes on some specific technology stack that might not really manage the end-to-end threats that we see today, that pretty much really is driven from a user, really targeted at the user and all the way down the stack. And what's very important, and this is a critical aspect in my view, sometimes we, as part of our evaluation, we do understand what kind of tools, technologies we need. Example, if you want to manage, let's say, file integrity monitoring for cloud hosts, right? So we might have a view, but what happens about the kill chain, right from the time when an attacker does their initial footprinting to reconnaissance to exploitation all the way to a breach? Okay, how do I map my investment to the cyber defense kill chain? So that for me is a key ingredient for us to be able to drive resilience in terms of being able to manage risks and threats at the various points of a cyber kill chain. So really, these are some of the current challenges pretty much I see, across industries, and I've been talking to leaders from various industries. I'm currently with Pearson, the world's largest education company. We are responsible for managing millions of learner information. We run close to 25,000 plus, cloud workloads, 17, and we have on-prem. We have about 17 data centers, so you can imagine, managing your on-prem versus the cloud workload spread across a workforce of 40,000 employees in pretty much all markets of the world. That poses a significant challenge as we really change as a company, going from a print business to a digital business driven by learner experience and offerings of personalized learning to our learners around the world. So this is really, in my honest view, some of the challenges we see across the industry in terms of, cybersecurity investment or portfolio management. Okay, in my today's topic, I don't want to get too blogged on frameworks and stuff. I mean, today we know there are multiple cybersecurity architecture frameworks you can use. You could use the NIST cybersecurity framework. You could use the SAPSA. But in my view, really, those models are a little bit vanishing, right? Because we are not living in that monolithic architecture world. We are living in a cloud era where everything is about being adaptive. Being contextualized, really. But nevertheless, for the rest of my session, I just wanted to pick a model and show you how you could really, use this. So this is not just an update or a presentation. I wanted to make this a little bit of something that you can take away and actually you can use within your companies to see how your cyber defense portfolio or your resilience, framework investment is shaping up. So if I look at the NIST framework, at a high level, we have what we call as a framework profile. Don't worry about too much of them. You'll get a hang of it as we go along, which really talks about, hey, what's my current state view? What's the business risk? What's the investments I've made? What are the risks? And really the traditional, where do I want to really get to from a cybersecurity from a journey perspective? And then we take that framework profile and then we build what we call as cybersecurity views. You could have a view for access management. You could have a view for monitoring. You could have a view for, let's say, threat analytics. So it depends how you use it, okay? Really, it's nothing in the traditional world. It's called as control domains. And then you have the framework core, which I think is the most important aspect. And a lot of my session today, I'm going to focus on that. While you build your cybersecurity investment, how do I really classify them into, do I have the ability to even identify threats? Going back to my cyber kill chain, hey, can I even quickly detect and identify attacks as they occur within my enterprise or hybrid or my cloud environment, and how and am I able to protect them? What's the investment I've made in protection, and am I able to actually detect vulnerabilities or threats before even I get targeted? And what's my response and recovery readiness like? So in essence, it's really about So in traditional security world, I'm sure you guys have heard about the defense in depth modeling and all of that. In my view, that's all a little bit old school. Okay, it's as much as defense in depth, equally important as defense in breadth as well. So this takes a little bit different approach and really looking at all your capabilities mapped to your cyber kill chain, as well across the ability to from identifying a threat to be able to recover when there's an actual breach. Okay, right. So as we go along, and again, guys, you can actually modify this and really customize this according to your organization needs. So if I typically look at the asset classes that I have in my traditional organization, right? So you have your devices. So those devices could be endpoints. It could be a smartphone, and a personally owned smartphone. It could be an IoT device that your industry is using. It could be a storage vault. It could be network. I mean, all of those are devices. And then you have your app layer, which is really your user interaction layer. And in fact, you could have multiple asset classes. If you want to, you can break out a separate asset class by cloud. If you want to show the distinction of, hey, what's my investment on cloud security versus my traditional enterprise. So you can have devices, apps, network, ranging from your perimeter to your core network to a third-party network and all of that. And then your data layer, which is really the information that I'm trying to protect here. And then you also have the users, right? As we see, a lot of the attacks are really targeted at the user. Name any attack, right? It's a Google incident or, any of the recent attacks. So a lot of them are targeted at the user. And then I have the operational functions, right? Hey, identifying, hey, do I know my assets? How do I didn't understand my attack surface? What's my exposure? All of that. And then the protect, do I have sufficient protection mechanisms, detect, respond, and recover, as I covered in the previous slide. So what I'm really trying to get to is, so you got to categorize the asset classes, and you can customize. You can add a cloud asset class. You could have a platform asset class. It's really based on how you want to use this. But really, in this session, I wanted to share with you how you could really do an analysis of your cyber defense resilience portfolio here. Okay. All right, let's get to the meat. Okay, so I'm not sure if people have attended, RSAM on the RSA conference last year or so. This might have been introduced. A great friend of mine from Korea who initially kind of built this, but we started to evolve this a lot over time. Here it is. Okay. So on the horizontal, you see the various NIST core. In terms of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Then on your vertical axis, you see what do I want to really protect? Net devices, applications, network data use. Again, as I said, you can really modify that the way you want it. And then the degree of dependency, right? If you see from identification to recover, the dependency on technology pretty much diminishes, and the dependency on people is much higher as we go to recover. And there's also a set of processes that runs across, whether it's a change management process, your incident response process, or in your protection, it could be your antivirus protection processes, patching process, all of that. So the process class really runs across all of the various attributes that you see here. All right, so this is a real example, okay? So if I look at, hey, what's my investment in, let's say, protection technologies across the, okay, on my devices, I have antivirus, I have, HEPs on them, on the application, I do my static code testing, dynamic code testing, I might have runtime application security protection, I might have WAFs. On my network, I have my network IPSS data, I have DLP encryption. So this kind of gives you a view. Again, this is just an illustration for you to give you a view of, hey, if I if I draw an inference out of this, I can see that I have my protect buckets are really full, whereas my respond recover is really light across from devices to use. So at least it gives you an initial view of where is my investment focused and where do I need to balance out. Hey, do I need detect, respond, recover on my application? I seem to be only having a protection driven control sets. And in the DevSecOps world, this is of paramount importance, right? I mean, I don't want my SOC to be handling security incidents in the DevSecOps world. You might have a security incident fired up, picked up, evaluated, confirmed, automatically gets assigned to the Jira queue of the product team that's managing that application. It's their responsibility to go and fix it. So the DevSecOps was a lot of these things really changes. So and it's really important to at least get a view of how your investment is heading. And again, you can use this in different ways. All right, so this is another interesting chart. It's almost like a the tombola games that we play here. So under investing versus over-reliance, right? So if I just box them out, I see that, hey, it looks like I have very little response capabilities and apps, data layer detect response is almost empty, which is extremely vital for if you look at areas like GDPR to understand, hey, how is my data, where is there a leak, how do I respond, and all of that. So this is great. This tool can be used in various different ways, my dear friends here. Okay, this is another one. Okay, you could actually go ahead and even assign a dollar value, right? You could look at all the investments you're making in protection detection and really come with a dollar value, which will give you, hey, is my cyber risk investment portfolio's code, or is it is it balanced out, or and in some cases, very rightly so, yeah, you could have it more biased, right? Maybe it's more biased on the application and the data layer and the user layer, because that's where we see most of the attack vectors targeted, whereas we could be making less investments as time goes across your infra layer, right? So that could be rational. It doesn't mean that everything needs to be balanced out and you could be spending $500,000 on application and $500,000 on infra. It doesn't mean that. It's just to give you a view of how should a balanced resilient cyber defense portfolio look like. All right, you could even go ahead and make a scoring, okay, based on, you could develop defense in depth scoring. I'm not a great fan of that, but I showed it out for people who might be still in the early part of the journey of evolution from a traditional enterprise security to digital business driven security modeling. Again, you guys could use this in n number of ways. And there we go, the vendor rationalization. You could also fit in all the vendors you use within the company. You could be using Veracode, you could be using IBM, you could be using Black Duck for open source code scanning on the application. So you could really map all your vendor and see, are there opportunities for vendor leverage? Are there opportunities for vendor optimization where you could really leverage your large partners who could deliver much more value from a financial perspective as well. And then comes, in terms of looking at, again, in terms of, as an example, right? So let's say application security. Where have you made the investments? Okay, you seem to have RAS, WAF, secure coding, all of that. Okay, at the user layer, great, you are invested on making sure users are adopting secure practices and secure coding. So have you invested on that? Have you even invested on, let's say, digital rights management, which is pretty much an application security kind of driven technologies, so digital rights management, or in terms of API gateways, right? In terms of API management, where does this sit in? So you could really take a pick a domain and see whether your investment in tools and technology spans, how that spans across from devices to users. And protecting applications might also be important in devices, maybe on your smartphone or BYOD. How do I have corporate application protection there? So there are a number of ways you can think through this. Again, this is just meant to give you a view of how you should really go about balancing, or I should say, using this to fit your organization's needs. All right, this is again, this is really giving you a view of the refresh cycle, right? So you made those investments. How often do I need to refresh them? There could be technologies which you might need to even look half yearly, because the rate of which technology is evolving. Example, very recently I was looking at container protection technologies. We have very limited vendors. Up until early this year, I think you had probably one major vendor, and within the span of 8 months, I have now close to 3 or 4 vendors who have come out with various technology for container protection. Right, the way IPS works in containers is very different to how IPS would work in your traditional gateway-based, whether it's cloud gateway or your on-prem gateway. Container protection is really very different, right? So we're seeing there's a lot of traction in the rate at which technology capabilities, functionalities are being introduced by vendors. So you got to have at least a refreshed view of that in terms of how do you manage, how do you get the best out of your investment. So that's really it, in all honesty, that I wanted to share with you today, at least giving you a view of how you could use this cybersecurity framework, I would say cybersecurity defense matrix to manage this. Okay, there are some really interesting questions. So what do you think is the most important factor to building a portfolio? So I think it's a great question. I think there are a few aspects to it. Firstly, it's very important to map your portfolio to the business, right? So as an example, I'll give you an example of Pearson, right? I mean, we are shutting down data centers. We are really cloud first, moving to the cloud. So that changes your portfolio. So in terms of your business direction. Now, secondly, we are moving away from a product centric business to a platform centric business. So the technologies you would traditionally invest in your enterprise apps is kind of dying down. I'm going more digital platform driven, cloud driven, investments. We are collapsing our traditional offices. We're going to digital workplaces, which means you would need very tightly integrated security capabilities in your UCC space, right? Unified collaboration space. So for me, I think the critical ingredient of it, of building an effective portfolio, is really understanding your business shift. That's and you got to clearly line them out. Sometimes we use the term business very often without really understanding what it means to security. So you got to think through that a little, workshop it a little, and really understand. Okay, what does this move to, let's say digital age offices mean from a security perspective, right? So you got to really, what are the opportunities for reducing my investment? Not just, hey, every time we talk about scaling up your investment, that's great, but there could also be opportunities for scaling down when my traditional part of the business is really on a downward slope. So for me, that's a critical, important aspect. And the other one is really the cyber kill chain. That view for me is very fundamental. You could, in terms of mapping down your investment to the cyber kill chain, to really understand where are you vulnerable from the mechanisms to breach handling. Okay, and then that becomes very important as well. Again, just a couple of thoughts. I'm sure. There will be other viewpoints as well. That's just in my own personal opinion. Some thoughts here. Hopefully it helps. Right, great question. Where do you start? Where do you start is by knowing what's the investment, what's your current portfolio look like. So where do you start? Again, is to really understand what's the investment you have made. How does your security architecture look like? Doing that homework, that'll give you a initial view of how you are initially set up, right? Then I look at how my business is moving, and then make okay, what is that now that I need to support the change in my business model. So where do you start? You should start with really understanding what's my current investment, what's my current portfolio, how does it look like, what are the tools I've made. So that might mean you got to make, really you can't sit on a desk and do this. You got to engage. As an example, you might need to talk with, let's say, your technology function to understand what's the, what's their roadmap for endpoint protections patching, what's the tool sets there. Then you might need to talk to someone on the content space, understanding how do they do digital rights management there, content protection. Then you might need to talk to the team that manages your third-party engagements, understand how do they do assessments of the vendor risks. So it could really mean first talking to multiple people and building that holistic view to give you across the enterprise what's your current portfolio like. I think that's a start. All right, guys. Hopefully, if there are no questions, I'll be more than happy to respond to any offline questions. I'm not sure how that's going to be orchestrated through this channel, but I'm more than happy to share as much as I know. Have a great evening, guys, or a morning, wherever you are. Thanks. Bye.